waiting, and hopefully you can hear me okay. Steve.
Once the music stopped, I was able to hear you. I didn't hear the music. I heard a bunch of Martian stuff, and then now I can hear you fine, so we're good.
So the problem was your music, basically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, maybe so, but you have to blame it on Jerry Jeff Walker, which would be unseemly as he's passed.
All right, then. You're coming to the Northwest here, and next week, actually, and it's next Wednesday, isn't it? Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah,
week.
I think that's right. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm on the road, so every night, Saturday night, and every morning is Monday morning. It's kind of, I never know what day it is on the road, what day of the week it is. I think it's Tuesday, so I think that's right. We have
Wednesday. It says here Wednesday, Steve.
Yeah. Oh, today Wednesday. Okay, then see.
Next Wednesday. Well, hopefully.
Okay, that makes sense. And I did. We were in Ireland for a second for the Galway Folk Festival, and then came over from some UK dates, and then headed to Spain for one show. Flew back to England, and then we have these 3 hard ticket dates in Ireland. First time in Sligo ever, so that's going to be an experience. I've been to Sligo a lot, but I've never played there.
Yeah, and you've been to Galway a lot. I mean, you have a great affinity with Galway, so it's only up the road.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I had friends that lived in Sligo, and I went up there to sit in sessions sometimes when I was in. I spent winters in Galway for several years in the like kind of the mid part of the '90s to the early 2000s, because I was just become so fascinated with music there. It started a long time ago with I knew that the music that I played, it had its roots in Ireland and Scotland, all along. And then when I moved east to Nashville and got around more, music that came from the Appalachians rather than the Texas stuff I grew up with, it was even more connected to that. And then a couple of things happened. The Pogues and our first records came out at the same time. And I learned a lot from Terry Woods, who was the one guy in that band that was steeped in trad, because he'd been in Steel Eye Span, and he came in as a guest musician on their second record and stayed. And when I got to know those guys, I learned a lot from Terry and from the other guys in the band. And then met Mike Scott's a friend. He made Fisherman's Blues while I was over here producing another record. And Sharon Shannon, did some of that with him, and I met her through that. And when Sharon's first record came out, it was right after I kind of got out of jail and started my life over again. And Sharon and I started recording together, and that's Sharon's band on the Galway Girl in the original recording. It's the Woodchoppers, her band at the time, which was Sharon, the Kane sisters, and Mary was on banjo, Mary Shannon on banjo. It was a pretty great band.
You're not somebody that's afraid to open yourself up to new influences. You referenced some of them there, starting out with obviously, music that formed your background, but then opening it up to roots and blues and, music that came from Appalachia. And
right.
It's where you are and what you're listening to.
I'm a folk singer, I mean, I started out in coffee houses. So there's a little bit, I mean, some of it's probably being an overachieving autodidact. I have like an 8th grade education. So everything I've ever learned, I've had to go out and find out for myself, mostly in books and records. And I had really good teachers. I met Townsend Sant when I was 17, and Guy Clark and Jerry Jeff Walker when I was 19. I got to Nashville at this moment when there was sort of this progressive songwriting salon going on, and it didn't really last forever, but I got there for the heart of it, and I learned a lot in a very short period of time, and it just sort of taught me to keep my ears open, and I was afraid to make a bluegrass record for a long time, and because it was that's not primitive music, it's really sophisticated music. It was invented about the same time as bebop. And it was people that just came from a different part of the country thinking along the same lines. Bill Monroe was like a pretty highly evolved creature when it comes right down to it. He invented an art form, an American art form. And I finally got up the nerve to do it. And I did it with the best bluegrass band in the world at the time, the Del McCoury Band. And, I've recorded with Sharon. And of course, I do need to make an Irish record one of these days. I do need to. I know everybody. I know Donna Lenny. I know Sharon. I know I've got to make a record at some point. And the clock is ticking. You know, I'm 68 years old, so I got to do it sometime soon.
Well, I would imagine if you call them up and say, "Listen, how about we do something together?" That you'll be pushing an open door.
I saw Sharon the other night.
There you go.
So, yeah. We'll see what happens.
What's a Steve Earle show like these days? I mean, you know, there's so many genres that you could include in your show. So, you know, to even a passing fan, what's the show like? What does it contain these days?
You'll hear a lot of songs that you want to hear. I mean, I'm always sensitive to that. I play Copperhead Red every night. I play the Galway Girl every night. But this show's pretty much, you know, I saw Bruce Springsteen earlier in the year, and he came to our show in Birmingham the other night.
Yeah.
He played Birmingham the night before, and you know, he played my benefit for my son's school last year, and it's just. He's sort of the performer that we were all trying to keep up with when I started making records, because you know, he kept the bar very, very high. And, you know, he came out this year, and the show is very much, it's a rock show, and it's what people want to hear. I'm touring without a band. So the way to make that the sort of things that I think fans will be happy with, especially when I haven't been to a lot of these places since before the lockdown. This is my first trip to Europe before we all got locked down. So it's kind of a songbook. It's stuff that goes back to my first record, and I think people have been pretty happy with it so far. And I don't change the set very much. I don't use a set list. There's a piece of paper on stage, and a lot of people, a few people in smaller venues have grabbed them thinking they're getting a set list, and that's not what it is. It's a list of names that if you haven't seen the show, you won't understand. I wrote a song called It's About Blood on the last record of original material I released, which was called Ghosts of West Virginia. And it's the names of 29 men killed in an explosion in a coal mine 14 years ago in West Virginia. And they're part of the last part of a song that I do at the show. And I'm terrified of leaving out one of those guys' names. I'm pretty good at memorizing stuff as an actor and as a songwriter and a singer. But I'm just terrified if I leave one of those names out. You know, I just can't face that, so I've always had that list on the stage.
Okay. Funny you should reference Bruce Springsteen, because I thought in this tour that he was an artist in a way, not like him, but to be looking back rather than forward. But also he was a little self-indulgent, and you know, we'll definitely allow him that. It wasn't a tour for, you know, the casual fan. But absolutely.
Really? You've thought that? I don't know. I saw it in New Jersey just a few weeks ago, and I don't think it's changed very much from everything I've heard. I heard everything I wanted to hear, and except for Johnny 99, because I'd heard that was being performed, and I'd never seen him do it with the E Street Band. My first Bruce Springsteen show was the Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle in Liberty Hall in Houston in 1972. Wow. And he opened with Wild Billy Circus songs. So I've seen a lot of Bruce Springsteen shows. Wow. But this one, I don't know. He played, the only thing he didn't play that I was looking for was Johnny 99. And I saw him after the show, and he said, yeah, I did. I saw him in New Jersey. I saw him in Newark, and he said, yeah, I replaced that with Jersey Girl tonight. And I said, okay, fair enough.
That'll be understandable.
Not as self-indulgent, really. Well, maybe you saw a different show on a different planet.
Yeah. Although I probably didn't see a different show, because he's not changing the set list that much this time around. But
he hadn't changed it at all, but I know it.
No. Yeah. But Bruce aside, your tour, you tour mostly during the summer now. Well, I suppose this is the first time in Europe since COVID, but mostly during the summer. Is that weather related, or to do with home?
No, I mean, it's one thing. The weather here is like changed so much that I don't think I'd be thinking about that very much. I mean, it's like all my friends over here getting skin cancer because there's not used to this much sun. But it's I don't know. It's real. It's just about. I wish I could tour all the time, year round. But two things. The most important is I have a son who's 13 who has autism. And he's in a school in New York City that he's been in since he was 3. And it has what he needs, and the city of New York helps me pay for it, and it's more than I can afford. I've been married too many times to have accumulated very much. And his mom and I split up around the time he was diagnosed. She stayed in the city for several years. She wanted to go back to Tennessee, and it got to be a little bit of a war for a while. And then finally I just said, I'll come off the road 9 months of the year and keep John Henry in school, because I'm writing music for theater now anyway, and I need to be in town for that.
Okay.
But and then 3 months he'll come to you in Tennessee, and she comes to see him in New York, and I go to Nashville to do the Grand Ole Opry fairly often, about once a month the last year or so, and so bring him for the weekend. He'll see her then. He comes to see her in New York. Then she gets him for the summer, and I get on a tour bus. So this year we came to Europe first and started in Paris on June 1st or June 2nd, I guess actually, and did a few dates on the continent, and then we came over here to these two islands where I sell the most tickets, and more people know all my songs.
Yeah. Irish audiences, how do you find them in comparison to different parts of the world? Are we much the same? Are we more appreciative? Are we louder?
It's just, I think a lot of it is I do really well in Canada, as far as besides the States, and probably better than the States. England's more population, and so I probably sell overall more tickets and make more money touring in England than I do any place else. Ireland would be second, and it's just because it's a little smaller market. It's one of those things. There are not many bigger places to play. We're doing Vickers Street this time. That's what was available. It's a great venue in Dublin. I've done everything done the Olympia more than any place else. I was never a huge venue artist in any of those places. Galway, we played the Black Box, which has kind of been my home there in Galway for a long time when I get out west. It's just, in Ireland, and a lot of my audience in England is Irish too. There's not that it's a part of the audience here and everywhere I go. I wrote the Galway Girl, so that's
it's a big calling card.
That's the one thing I know is going to be remembered of my work after I'm gone, for sure, at least on that island. And of course, they'll say some Irish guy wrote it because that's what they did with Danny Boy, but it's not that English guy wrote that song. But it's just, Ireland has the strongest oral tradition of any place I've ever been, and it's built more around music than it is any place else I've been. And I think that's why it's been such a big part of the heart of the music, the American music I grew up on. And it's in Canada, it's the same thing. I think there's, the Irish and Scottish thing there, which is really the same thing, is really super, super strong. And that narrative exists. And Canada's produced way more than its share of singer-songwriters when you consider the population.
You're very outspoken and a campaigner about a lot of important issues, and I'm guessing that on tour there'll be anecdotes and stories and opinions in between the songs. And I think that, part of that is what people come to appreciate and come to hear as well.
Without a doubt, I'm probably in my old age, and it probably doesn't have as much to do with age as it does experience. I'm just as militant, just as radical as I ever was. I'm a lefty, and a pretty hardcore lefty. I also grew up in a country with no viable socialist party. So I've always voted with the Democratic Party. I never joined it until I had to, in order to vote for Bernie Sanders in a primary election, because I thought his participation in the process was important to a lot of issues. The last election cycle, I backed Joe Biden the whole way because I believed he was our only hope, and that's proven to be true. And whatever everybody goes on and on about, I think he's done a pretty good job. Inflation is going down. He's doing what he said he was going to do, and he inherited a mess because there'd been basically an orangutan at the controls for 4 years, and a lot of damage can get done in that period of time. So all those things are important. I also believe, then I say this, and this is more, you'll hear more political stuff in my country than you will here, because there's some scarily American looking things going on this side of the pond. So, I don't lay completely off of it. And I hope people, but it's still, in the States, we did get to a point where it becomes so divisive that sometimes, rather than preaching to the choir, I find myself preaching at the choir, because I think our problem is just as much about the left not listening to the right as it is the right not listening to the left. I think there's a point at which democracy can only, you can't hope to have a democracy if you're unwilling to have a conversation with somebody you're going to disagree with when the conversation starts. Mm-hmm. If you've decided in advance, what somebody thinks and that it's hopeless, and that they're the enemy, then it's over. There is no democracy. And the people that really are in control of things because they have the most money and the most power have learned to depend on that more and more and more. So it's up to us. I mean, we have to learn. We used to communicate even when we disagreed in my country. And I think it's happened here too. I think you see it in, I don't know. I'm in England at the moment. I saw in both England and Ireland what the European Union did. And it was the European Union. It wasn't, people said, oh, well, that was millennium money. Well, it didn't just fall out of the zero at the end of 2000. It came from the European Union by and large, and a bunch of countries getting together. And what I tell people here is like, especially in England, is be careful because, I watched things that you couldn't even find a phone box that worked in this country when I first came in 1986. Things have improved quite a bit. Ireland, it was, I mean, there's some bad things that happened after it, some American things that happened, but I watched Ireland, it was exciting to be in Ireland in the mid 90s when she wasn't losing her best and brightest to immigration automatically for the first time in 150 years. It was a very, very exciting time to be there. And I witnessed that. And I just think that it's, the European Union is like the only hope that anybody over here in this part of the world has of ever being able to equal the influence of the United States and China, which are the two real powers in the world. Russia's committing suicide as we speak. I think that's going to be the final outcome of all that. But the European Union is an important entity, and it's going to happen, and it's going to be important with or without England. And I just sort of feel bad for my friends that live here because they left.
Well, continue to spread the gospel, and in word or in song, and the best of luck.
That's speaking as an outsider and to some degree an impartial witness who witnessed this stuff. So that's for what that's worth.
It's good to hear some commentary, and it's good. And as you said, it's let's have more debate and less rancor, which seems to be the way.
Absolutely, all this stuff needs to get talked about, and we run into this. I watched it and I was guilty of it myself to a certain degree. And I just think that until we can, start having those conversations, that how's democracy possible without a conversation?
Absolutely. Steve Earle, the best looking Sligo. Something is still available for the show. Now it's a fully seated solo acoustic concert, and that's at the Knocknarea Arena. This is at the ATU in Sligo, and it is next Wednesday night, the 28th. Good luck in Sligo. Good luck with the rest of the tour. Pleasure to chat to you, Steve.
Thanks. Good talking to you.
You know that guy I've been seeing?
Yeah?
Turns out my sister's been seeing him too.
Oh, really?
And I heard he's been seeing Siobhan